What is up, everybody? Audio Slave Podcast, episode 23 on, what is it, August 12th now, right? 2020? Yeah. How you guys doing? I'm here with Anthony and Nate. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing fantastic. We'll get into the details of the show, but excited for this upcoming guest.
Yeah, Hump Day, midweek, episode 23. Did a little Jimmy Eat World tribute this week, so it kind of goes in tandem with the favorite song 23, right?
Oh yeah, good call. Yeah, episode 23, and that song is probably it's a great album closer on Futures, which we did an appreciation post for yesterday on Instagram. So speaking of the socials, check us out on Instagram at PaudioSlave, on Twitter at PaudioSlave, and then if you want to email us, PaudioSlavePodcast@gmail.com. So those are the best ways to get in touch with us. We are very active on all platforms there. So yeah, really cool episode for you tonight. Tuan will get into the details of that in just a second. If you're new to the Audio Slave podcast tonight, go back and check out some of our other interviews. We had Scott Russo from Unwritten Law. We had Chad Neptune of Strong Arm and Further Seems Forever. We had Greg Bergdorf from Zebrahead, among others. So yeah, go back and check those out. Those are back there in the catalog. You will like those too. If you like tonight's episode, you will like those too. That being said, Tuan, you want to kind of intro our guest tonight?
Yeah, so we had a very special guest, especially for us who kind of grew up with the websites that he's had his fingerprints on and has owned and whatnot, and it's Jason Tate. Jason Tate from Absolute Punk fame and more recently Chorus.fm. So if you're not familiar with those sites, which if you listen to us, I'm sure you are familiar, but if you're not, they were foundational for our youth and growing up with music and discovering music, but very influential websites that covered a lot of the music that we grew up with and still listen to today. Jason's had quite the journey, really was at the forefront in an era where he was one of the few doing it to start. So we won't give too much away, but Jason, such a cool dude. You guys will love this interview. We had a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, there's the saying, a man's man. I feel like he's a nerd's nerd, if we
Absolutely.
If we were all friends in high school, we'd all be working together. And it seems like we are kind of at a distance because we're doing this podcast, and he has his achievements that we've look up to. So really awesome guy. Really, really, really happy that he came on to talk with us. So yeah, without further ado, here's Jason.
All right. Hey, Jason, great to have you on. Really excited to talk to you tonight. Much appreciated. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a nice night here in Portland. I was watching a little bit of baseball to begin with, had some dinner, and now I'm ready to do some podcasting.
Nice. Thank you. Well, we really appreciate it. We were thinking, just going through people we wanted to have on, and we've been looking at the music industry through a bunch of different lenses. We've had a record store owner on, we've had guitarists, we've had a few other people on here and there, and lead singer Scott Russo from Unwritten Law. And we're like, you know what? We all grew up reading AbsolutePunk.net. Let's see if Jason would come on. So much appreciated, man.
Oh, no problem at all.
So Jason, one of the things that, as we were thinking about this podcast with you and with all our guests, we love hearing about the come up. And with you, we do know most of the come up in terms of, the Blink fan site and whatnot. But what we're super curious of is there had to have been a turning point for you where you were like, I'm going to move away from being maybe a fan and, push this single band to, I want to create a website. And during a time when there's no blueprint for it, I think probably the only adjacent site at that point in time was Punk News?
It was punknews.org. There was punkrocks.net that was doing some stuff at the time. And those were the two that I remember reading right before I decided to move into the multi-band website world.
And so, yeah, I mean, we're not too far removed from AOL chat rooms at that point, or GeoCities sites. Like, I'm sure the Blink site was like a GeoCities or Metacrawler.
Angel Fire.
Angel Fire, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a throwback.
Like, what was the pilot like? Like, what was the catalyst where you were like, you know what, let's see if we can do something? And what was the game plan? Like, what was the intent?
The main thing for me is I had just started college. So it was 2001. I graduated high school, started college, was in a dorm room, was by myself with my roommate down in Southern California. First time basically living on my own extendedly, and was in a spot where, one, I had a lot of free time, and two, I had been running the Blink-182 MXPX fan page, and it was enjoyable. But that was started based on the idea of I just wanted to learn the internet. I wanted to learn how to put HTML up online. That was something I liked technology, I liked music, and it kind of just worked together. Now with all this extra free time, I was finding that a lot of the stuff that I was putting online, when there wasn't, say, like a new Blink album coming out or a new MXPX coming out, I still wanted to write about stuff. I still wanted to talk about things. And I was still discovering new bands. I was listening to bands like Newfound Glory, Slick Shoes, the different Rufio, different Yellow Card, different bands that were just starting out. And I would mention them, like kind of mention them in just some passing in recommendations or talking on AOL chats, things like that with people about like, man, if you like Blink, like this Newfound Glory band's pretty good. You guys should check these guys out. And as that was resonating with people, and I saw people be like, oh, this is good, and then start giving me more recs, I realized like, hey, like this doesn't exist. There isn't anything else online right now where people are talking about the kind of music I really like. As we said, like punknews.org existed, but that was still a little bit more towards the punk itself and less of this new thing, pop punk, that was starting to be more popular with my age group at the time. And so it just seemed like, well, let's see what happens. Let's put this together and see if like this can be a thing where it's expanded beyond just two bands, and it can be whatever I feel like talking about.
So almost creating something that you didn't see. So seeing a gap in the market almost.
Yeah, I was seeing something that I wanted. Like I wanted something like that. I wanted to find out about new music, and I'm buying CDs on a whim most of the time with lunch money, looking in the liner notes and being like, okay, who's getting recommended? Well, what's this homegrown band? Well, I'm going to check those guys out next. Unwritten Law. Okay. Like I know Blink likes them. I'm going to listen to them. And I was trying to discover as much music as possible because it was the first time that I was significantly passionate about like a new genre or a new thing. Like what was I, 18, 19. And this was something that like just finally music clicked with me. And so I'm trying to consume as much of this content as I possibly can. And at that time, there wasn't any sort of like database for it. There wasn't anything that was listing out all of these different bands, all of this different music that I could be listening to. And that's right before the heyday of like Drive Thru Records, Vagrant Records, and all of those record labels then also signing all of these bands and starting to take off and, give me something even more to talk about, write about, and share with other people.
Yeah, and that sounds like us. I mean, we instead of we didn't start we didn't start a blog back when we were 16, 17, but we did the same stuff. We went and we bought CDs on a whim. We maybe heard a song on the radio or a buddy told us about it, and we checked the liner notes and found other bands that way. So to hear you say that, and I'm a broken record. I've said this a million times on our podcast to other people that have listened, but that's us. That's our story too. So that's definitely why we wanted to have you on, because it sounded just like our come up too.
Yeah, very communal. It's kind of like we did this because we didn't see what we wanted to hear, or we weren't finding it for ourselves. We just decided to put this podcast together. And something that came to mind for us was community and culture that you have for both Chorus FM and Absolute Punk. We've visited, many websites, like you were saying, in that phase where you're just so interested in this new music and trying to get involved and just nerd out on pretty much anything you can find. We haven't found a whole lot of websites that have the founder so involved heavily. Kind of reminds me, and I always kind of geek out on like Elon Musk on here, how he's such an involved part of both SpaceX and Tesla. And part of the reason the company has such a success is that gives it a soul. So I feel like you kind of give the company, both Absolute Punk and Chorus, a soul. So how important is that to you to create a both community and culture for both these brands?
Hopefully I don't tweet in the same degree as Elon Musk.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Sometimes he needs to be quiet. but for me, I think that a big part of it was when this all started, it was based around talking with people, right? So like the first things I was doing was messaging people on AIM and getting people that I'd never met, and we're talking about bands, and somebody would just be like, hey, check out this band, check this out. Like my friends weren't listening to this kind of music at the time. My college roommate was the first time I had met somebody that even heard of half of the bands that I was listening to at 18. And growing up in a suburb in Oregon, just pop punk wasn't quite a thing until a couple years later. Then everyone was listening to it. So for me, like I wanted to always have that back and forth with people. I've said this before on other podcasts and probably written it down at one point, but I felt like at the time, and even today, so many music websites want to talk at you. They want to come from such a position of authority and say, this is good, this is bad, this is what you should be listening to. And for me, my motto was always like, I wanted to talk with people. And that was with Absolute Punk, even of like, my reviews were never something about like, this is the only good thing in the world and you should listen to it. It was like, this is what I like. This is something that I'm interested in. That's why I want to write about it. This is what I feel about it. And if you want to come back at me and we want to talk about it for 6 hours online, I'm ready to do that. I'm willing to have that kind of conversation, because that was the kind of passion that I had for the music, or what was interesting to me. It wasn't so much of just, writing something on rock tablets and taking it down from high and saying like, this is the band. It was more about wanting to explore and discuss things that I didn't think anyone was talking about. And at the time, bands like Jimmy Eat World, they were not praised back in the early 2000s. They were getting crappy reviews from everybody. Now, they're one of my favorite bands and everyone talks about them, and they're actually kind of taken seriously other places, but that was not happening at the time. And I felt that to have that kind of communication with fans and with other people was a missing ingredient, and something that actually actively excited me about the internet, because we could finally do that. It wasn't a newspaper, it wasn't an editorial, it wasn't just something being put out there. There was the capability to have this back and forth. So that's why the community has always been something that I've been, probably more actively interested in than others.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because this isn't negative to these other sites, but I've gone to so many sites over the years: PRP, Lambgoat, Punk News, and to be honest with you, I couldn't name one contributor, honestly, off the top of my head. But with Absolute Punk, like, Drew is a household name. You're a household name. Like, you have these in that, in this scene, those are kind of household brand names, and you look forward to those reviews. Oh, Jason just reviewed Yellowcard, new album. You look forward to it. Or Drew, on the heavier side, he would review something I was looking forward to. So you're right. It's just a different. You can that shows through in the site. It showed through in the site over the years that you wanted to have a community approach, which is so cool.
And I'd always pitch to writers, like I remember talking to Thomas Nassif when he first started writing for us, and I was like, man, like, you can own this genre. Like, your voice is very strong. You like pop punk. And he was like, yeah, like I like this. And he probably is arguably single-handedly responsible for hundreds of people listening to the Wonder Years over the years, because of how much he passionately wanted to talk about that band. And I think that those kind of bands and that sort of stuff is where the voice of a writer can come through. And that's something that I've always tried to do with my own writing, but also pitch to other people as well.
You mentioned Thomas. That he's the reason that I listen to the Wonder Years. So
there you go.
you guys talking about it on the podcast back a couple of years back now. I remember playing poker at Swan's house, saying, "Hey, you ever check out the Wonder Years?" He's like, "Yeah, I have." I'm like, "Oh man, I've been listening to a podcast and they've been talking about them, so I checked them out." So yeah, you're absolutely right. Definitely had a strong voice there. Speaking of having those contributors come in, that was a question that we had for you. When you start the website, it's you just by yourself the beginning?
At the very beginning, yes.
Yep. And then you start to grow a little bit. You got to bring in contributors, I would imagine.
Yeah, it all started organically. Like, that's what's weird is like, now this model, or the idea of having contributors, the idea of people writing, or even people just on their spare time writing stuff and putting it online on other people's platforms, is now way more widely accepted, or it's something Huffington Post basically turned it into a business model. But at the time, it was just, I was writing about Blink-182, and it was like a New Found Glory fan page that shot up, and I started talking to those guys on AIM, and I was like, well, like, what happens if we like kind of merged our stuff? Like, you're doing a bunch of stuff on New Found Glory, and you're writing about the Starting Line. What happens if you come over and like, we're just all doing it together? And they looked at the website, and they were just like, yeah, well, your back end's way nicer. I like how you're doing this. Like, let's do that. And so I don't even remember who the very first person writing for me was. Off the top of my head, it might have been Jake Wallace way back in the day. And so he started just doing some stuff on the website, and then he ended up leaving to go work for Drive Thru Records, and which then kept that sort of like pipeline going. The people would start working for us, get their name out there, work for a label, and then feed us news, feed us exclusives, feed us information. And it was an organic thing of, I would talk to a fan, they said, hey, I want to do this, and I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. And that's kind of continued on to this day. Like, I just had somebody email me 2 days ago, and they sent in a review. They were like, I really like this band. I want to review music. Here's an example of something. And I read it, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. Like, let's put that up. And if you want to write more stuff, let me know. So that's the sort of idea of like what I've always been trying to do it. Yeah. I mean, I never thought like, oh, I'm going to hire like 10 people and have like people working and doing all of this stuff. And then by the end of Absolute Punk, I mean, there's 35, 40 people at a time that were contributing to the website. And that's, I mean, we probably, I've never actually gone back to look, but I would be willing to bet that probably 3 digits worth of people have contributed at one point or another to Absolute Punk and now Chorus.fm over its lifetime.
That's awesome.
That's impressive. That's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people. And so, you know, like, as you said, like there's certain people that like became quote household names, like Drew Barringer, and he wanted to write all of these reviews, and that was what he wanted to own and what he wanted to do throughout college. And then there's people that wrote like a couple different things and were like, yeah, this isn't really for me. And I mean, for me, it's never been about, I never had like some sort of quota people had to hit. I never had some sort of idea of like, these are traffic goals for you, do this. It was always like, if you feel like you want to write something, write it. And like, I'll give you the space that has eyeballs to put it in front of. And if that works for you, then we're going to work out and be able to work together really well. And if it doesn't, if you're not as self-motivated, then it, you know, it just usually doesn't end up working as well, because I'm not going to be the kind of person that, or editor that's emailing you every 2 days to be like, do you have something? Do you have a review? Are you going to put this up? What's going on? Like, that just was never my personality.
That's really cool. I mean, that's kind of how we run things over here is, you know, whether it's favorable or not, you know, we're going to just speak our mind and talk as true music and nerd geeks and come from the heart. It's not to sell ads or anything like that. But that kind of growth, obviously, and genuine aspect kind of contributes to the exponential growth you saw in your website. So you sold to SpinMedia in 2008. At this point, were you looking for a partner or?
Basically, in 2008, I was at a spot where I had maxed out my resources. The website was very, very big, and it was very, very expensive to run. This was before, you know, things became much easier to scale online. And now, I mean, we're doing really good traffic now. At the time, we were probably doing 2-3 times as much as we're doing now, and it would not have cost nearly as much as it was costing back then. And my expertise of how to run a website back end was me at 2008. I'm 21 and had no real idea what I was doing, no education in it. Didn't even know who really I should be hiring to do any of this. So I was looking at it as, if I want to continue doing the website, which I did, and it was making money, so I knew that this was something that could be a lifelong potential job for me. If I'm going to do that, I either have to like take on VC money and go try to raise money so I can afford to hire people to do these things, or I'm going to have to team up with somebody that's already done it. And at the time, I knew some people that worked at the company at the time was known as BuzzNet or BuzzFeed. No, not BuzzFeed. It was BuzzNet at the time, and then they changed it to BuzzMedia because BuzzFeed got popular, and then they changed it to Spin. It's a nightmare. Anyway, so I knew some people that were working over there at the time, and they started reaching out to me about back-end things of being like, I see your website's down again. You're sending us a lot of traffic, because they post about, you know, Fall Out Boy and stuff like that, where it had accounts over there. So maybe like we can help you out with that. And that's when the conversation started. And then as that went on, I was like, okay, well, I trust you guys. And they were basically just like, we would like to pursue an acquisition. And at the time, it made the most sense to me based on, it would give me stability that I had so far not had, because I'm just out of college and I don't really know what my income is going to be month to month, week to week. And I no longer have to stress about keeping a server up that I don't really know how to run. And I can focus more on the stuff that I want to do, which is just running the website. So that was the original pitch to me, that I was like, okay, that makes sense to 22, 23-year-old Jason.
Yep, that makes sense. I mean, especially if you're getting that much traffic and you're kind of trying to run everything by yourself. You're the, you know, the guy in the back room running from server to server, trying to get everything up and keep everything going, that you get a little help. Why not, right? Especially at that age.
Yeah. And I mean, I was unable to, like, I just basically lived online. I like 100% of the time, like I was just online. I graduated. I was living back here in Portland, and was just like, I just never left my computer, and I was terrified that the server was going to go down. Anytime it goes down, like, I'm not making any money. That's literally how I'm paying rent. So it's like, so there was a stress factor that led to that sale, and just not really knowing what else to do in a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, if it's your livelihood, and so you're probably getting invites to go out and have a beer with buddies, and you're like, I can't be too far away. If it's the corner bar, I can run back, but Otherwise, I'm stuck here.
And that was even pre like iPhone, or like right before the iPhone. I mean, I remember running around with a BlackBerry. I had a Sidekick at one point. And I was trying to like check out the website on that thing, following up on people. Like anyone text me the moment if the website goes down, if anything happens with any of these bands, I need to know. And yeah, it was crazy.
And you're not kidding about the traffic, Jason. Like this was pre-Twitter. Your site was like, I would check it the way I check Twitter now, where like I would almost expect a new story to come up. It was that active, where like Chorus is, maybe 10 to 12 publishes a day, but in its heyday, AP was like Twitter.
Yeah, that feed that we had on the homepage, which was kind of always what we've wanted to do, is have some sort of feed. I mean, we were posting 50, 60, 70 different articles on a given day, depending on what was happening. Multiple different writers putting stuff up. And that's with the album reviews that were going up, or interviews as well. There'd usually be 2 or 3 at least a day. It was a lot. That said, there was also a lot more going on in our music scene and the stuff that we were listening to at the time. I mean, especially during that era where you're getting, in a year, like I've been doing this thing on the website where I've been ranking the albums that came out for each year starting in like 2005. And if you look at everything from like 2005 to like 2008, 2009, 2010, every single year there's 30, 40, 50 albums that we would like consider quote classics of that music scene, of just being like, I can't believe all of this came out at the same time. Like, how do we pay attention to all of this? Like, it's insane.
We've talked about that being a boom because we all graduated high school in 2003. So from the turn of the century to 07, 08, there was a lot of money thrown around in the industry. So we saw a lot of really good music hit a lot of bad stuff too, but a lot of really good music made its way to people's ears because of that. So I'm not shocked that you had that many albums in that time frame, but it does seem like a lot. It's a lot of music.
Yeah, I mean, it was like Drive Thru Records, Victory Records, Vagrant, all Fearless Records, all of those labels had a stack of albums they wanted to get out, and we were posting all the news and be like, this song, and now the video, and now they got tour dates, and they're going on tour here, and this band got drama with this band, so we've got to post about that as well. And it became a as you said, like that feed felt very Twitter-like at the time, where you could refresh it 3 or 4 times during an hour and see 6 or 7 different things posted just within that amount of time.
You know what? What you just said just made me think of, Jason, is it seems like in context, the pop punk era is almost equivalent to like craft beer, in the sense that it's a mainstream commodity or product, but it's a hybrid of pop, which is, top 40, and punk, which is roots. And so that's craft beer. And that's what that kind of phase was for pop punk, is just like, oh man, this awesome music that's getting heavily promoted and doing these awesome cross promotional tours between like a whole slew of bands we were talking about, like so much good stuff coming out at the same time, that like it was just like a gold mine. It was just like pure genuineness and just great music and great promotion, both from your end and the consumption on the end user capacity, that it was just like a success that would just like groundswell from top to bottom. And so that's something I just kind of thought of just now, because it's just like we were all part of that, which is really cool. We all loved it, so we still do.
It was also right at the spot of the internet before it became kind of what it is now, and before everything splintered outward. And now you have little factions on Twitter, you have Twitch streams, you got Reddit, you got Facebook groups, you got all these little other places that little tiny niche communities can build up. And at that point in time, it was like, Absolute Punk was the place to be for that sort of thing. Like it didn't exist in a splintered area. It was there, and it was happening every day, all the time, constantly, and that was stressful.
Yeah, I'm sure. But you're right, though, it was one-stop shop back then, and now you're right. Everything is splintered. I mean, when we depending on what we do for an episode each week, we're looking at different places to those little factions to promote, to try to get more people to us. So I imagine it'd be a lot, not easier, but a lot different, 10, 12 years ago, where it was one spot you could throw it to. We'd probably be sending you stuff left and right. I mean, we do now a little bit, but not every week.
Yeah, I think that is what's interesting, because like if I was going to start, I've thought about this before. Like say it's me now starting something, what happens? And it's like I probably don't have my own website. Like that's not what happens. It's an Instagram account. It's a Snapchat account. It's stuff on TikTok. It's something like that is A, owned by somebody else, which sucks, and B, not something that even looks like what Absolute Punk was, and it doesn't have that same sort of feeling of community or like centralness to it where you go to a place. It's like it would be living in everyone else's other feeds and be like, well, here's, and I don't know, it's disappointing to me that went away, because obviously, I mean, maybe I just sound like the old man, but I like that. Like, that's the sort of thing that is interesting to me, but I'm still the guy that visits individual websites every day to read about different things. So that's still what I do.
Well, and we're similar because we're of similar age. And when we started this, Nate and I had joked about it for years. And then we kind of brought Anthony into the fold a few years back, and we really started to think about it, a year ago. And it's like, we want to be the place like that where people go to, and we have our kind of hands in everywhere, as opposed to being that niche one little thing. And because we haven't seen it, we don't see it. It's not there anymore. Everybody's kind of, like you said, splintered off into a different faction. So
like if you're doing a podcast, if you're doing a podcast, you've got to be up on, not only have the feed out so it goes to all the podcast players, but most places are trying to get themselves on YouTube as well, or they've got to be like, can we break out clips for Instagram? Can we get ourselves on Snapchat? It's like you have to do so much promotion in so many different places, hopefully to find little slivers of audience that you can grab and then be like, please subscribe, and like to something so that you can continue to come back and keep finding this. I don't know. The world of content creation in 2020 feels so much different to me than when the internet was, at its early stages, that sometimes it can be overwhelming.
He really just described our last 5 months, right?
And that's the thing. Like, if I'm a 20-year-old right now and I go to Chorus FM and I don't know Jason Tate, I don't know the AP history, you see this polished end product, but like when you really put it in context of like when you started this in like 99, 2000, there's no YouTube. There's, you're relying on AIM for communication or email and whatnot. That must be very interesting, where I assume you'd still, like back in the day, you would probably still get hit up via email to promote and whatnot, but there was no YouTube links. So like, how is that transition gone? Like, do you find it harder because it's harder to sift through the BS, or is it easier because everything's within reach?
I mean, the end product that I can put onto the internet now, I think, is better because, first of all, like I remember when videos were first being uploaded online, and we were using things like Real Player, and they looked like little QuickTime, looked like little postage stamps that were 30 megabytes that took forever to download. You couldn't do anything, let alone embed them. And if you wanted to put MP3s up, you eat through your server bill within 5 minutes if you had any sort of traffic at all. So, I mean, I remember hosting those by myself and being like, here's a song, and then being like, and that cost me $1,000. That's awesome. Like,
wow,
crap. It's like, that's no fun. So then all of a sudden it was like things like mp3.com became a thing. MySpace became a thing, and it became easier to like reach out or to link out to something. So it'd be like, this band has a new song, it's up on MySpace, go check it out, I can link out. And that became like the default position, that along with Pure Volume, of how we sent music to people or got people to listen to it. Now with YouTube, it's very easy for the end product, it can continue to live like on my website. So now if like a band releases a song, 99% of the time that thing is also on YouTube. I can link to it on the streaming platform, but I can also just include the YouTube video. It's right there, people can listen to it, they can stream it, which is, in my opinion, a better experience than what we were doing way back in the day. But yeah, back then it just felt like everything was very intense of how much stuff was coming, and you didn't have the same ability of what to do with it once you got it, just because based on like technical limitations.
Yeah, because you're not downloading it in seconds like you do now on your phone or wherever else.
Yeah, you can stream anything. If we get a song, we can put it up on SoundCloud. Yeah. I can host it now and it costs nothing. It's like pennies, which makes younger me a little bit mad. But
yeah,
there's no on-demand scaling with AWS or Google Cloud.
Exactly. That would have been nice.
That's crazy. $1,000 too. That's not. Oh my God. Jeez.
Oh, I mean, back in like 2006, 2007, 2008. I mean, the server bills. I was just looking at them the other day because the guy that used to host the website reached out on LinkedIn of all places, which is really weird. And he was like, "Hey, do you remember when I used to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I remember do that." So I was looking back to see if I could find the bills. It was like $2,000 or $3,000 a month just in hosting fees at the time. It was very intense.
And now we just we throw up a playlist on all three of the servers every week, or the music streaming services, Spotify and Apple and all that stuff, and it doesn't cost us anything. So that's
get all that. Podcast can go up on SoundCloud, Libsyn, any of those things, just gonna be pushed out. You're not gonna have to worry about it at all. Pennies, yeah.
Thank you for paving the way.
Jason, this whole conversation just brings me to a point of, when bands talk about in interviews and so forth, and we've had a few on the show here, is when you're in your beginning stages, there's a lot of pay to play. So if you want to play a club, let's say here, I'm down here in San Diego, so like Los Angeles, you want to play like the Roxy or something because it's a legendary club. So it's pay to play. And it just made me think, like, although things were expensive and although you were shelling out those dollars, you were early to the game. And one of my idols is Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia. And he had a famous speech. You can find it on YouTube, and I'm not sure which university it's at per se, but he does answer some Q&A with the crowd. And one of the questions was, I really adore what you're doing with your company and how it gives back to the community and in the environment. I want to start a company like this. What do you recommend? And he said, I actually wouldn't recommend starting a company because back when I started Patagonia, things were a little bit different and there just wasn't any other companies doing it. And so it was a little more grassroots. The way it is today, you actually would be in a better situation financially to, piggyback or white label or, work off of some other server. So to your point, it's maybe more expensive to do it, back then. That's all there was then. So the efficiencies were different. So it kind of goes to your point to, you had to pay to play, but here you are today. And one thing we saw is you eventually bought Absolute Punk back from SpinMedia and rebranded it as Chorus FM. Was this a long time in the making? And are you happy with the move and change back to Chorus FM?
Not like it wasn't that long in the making. I think that happened in 2015, the end of 2015, 2016. And right around like 2009, 2010, 2011 era is when I knew things were not going great at Spin. It was a lot of bureaucracy. It was a lot of just a huge influx of VC money to a bunch of people that wanted to spend VC money. And they didn't necessarily want to build a company, in my opinion. They didn't necessarily want to build something that lasted, but they sure loved spending a couple $100,000 on dinners for everybody, or sure enjoyed everyone going out and showing how fancy their new car could be and various things like that. I mean, everyone there was paid a lot of money to basically burn money at a media company for 8 years. And it never really made sense to me as somebody that was trying to bootstrap everything over at Absolute Punk for so long. And like, finally it was like, we have resources. Like, what are we doing? Like, what's going on? And then realizing that in a lot of ways, Absolute Punk's traffic was then subsidizing a lot of the other smaller websites that they were just bringing in. And then they would have 4 or 5 people that they were paying to work on a website that had 1/3 at best of the traffic we did. And I could barely get them to finally let me hire one extra person to work with me. And that made it very difficult. So I was frustrated. Like, I did not like the last few years there, but at the same time, this was the thing that I started in a dorm room and had a hard time letting go of it. But by the end, when I knew that, like, I knew they were in trouble financially and they were not going to be around long, they were about to declare bankruptcy. And at that point was when I was like, okay, I have basically a couple ways that I can go. I can either try to get the entire website back. And if I get the entire website back, then there's a lot of pressure to continue running Absolute Punk. Or I can just say goodbye, leave it, and it will just disappear forever. And there will be nothing to do with Absolute Punk, and I can start something new. Or there's a hybrid of the two. And based on discussions with Spin at the time and how much money they wanted for the entire website back, I didn't think it was going to be financially viable to buy everything. But at the same time, I was also kind of relieved because I was burnt out on the Absolute Punk lifestyle by that time. And I was ready to try to find something that fit with who I was at this age that worked a little bit better. And that was why I decided to buy the domain name and the intellectual property of all the trademarks, the logos, and all of that stuff, buy the domain back so I could point it somewhere and have it, and but not just keep running the website itself, and instead morph it into what I'm doing now. But it was very difficult also to let go of that history that I had with it. And so it was like, if it doesn't cost as much, but I can bring the domain name with me and at least have that's important. And so that was why I ended up deciding to do that and transition to what Chorus has become.
That's like that alone it's pretty amazing, because that story doesn't happen a lot, where the one who sold it has even an opportunity to buy back, because oftentimes it's either on its way down the shitter in one, or two, it's grown so much that it's just not an option. But what I was thinking about is, when there are these buyouts, a lot of times the vision that you have, they may sell it up front where they have that same vision, but when it comes down to it, you start working with them, it's not always the case. So like, was that kind of what it was, where like if you asked them in 2008, hey, what's the name of the new Paramore album, could they tell you? Like, were they in tune?
No, yeah, no, they had no idea. No, like not only no, they had the people, and the people they were bringing in also had no idea. And like that was the problem, is that they basically then bought a bunch of music websites. And at the time they had punknews.org, they had Stereogum, they had us, and then under us we bought Property of Zach, Under the Gun Radar, and a variety of other websites. So we had a bunch of music websites, but they wanted to treat every single one the same. And they thought what was working on Stereogum should absolutely work on Absolute Punk as well. And I'm like, they're two different sites. They have two different communities. They have two different audiences. It doesn't work the same way. You can't do that. They wanted to just be like, well, just get your website on a WordPress site and keep doing what you're doing. I'm like, the entire point of Absolute Punk is built on a community. It's built on this crappy bulletin board system. Yes, but everybody's there to talk about this sort of stuff. You can't just shove WordPress on top of that and think you're going to have the same success. It's like, it's not the same audience. It's not the same sort of thing. So that, combined with them also trying to wring every single dollar they could out of every single page view by just plastering ads on, to my forever a hell. I still have nightmares about those emails. Like the emails of just being like, so we've decided we want to add like another header banner, and we're thinking of like doing this takeover with McDonald's. And I'm just sitting there just like, I want to die. Like this is this is absolutely my hell. And being like, no, like you promised me that I would have editorial control over everything on the website, including any extra stuff that went onto the website. And they'd be like, yeah, we just don't really think we're going to listen to that part of the contract. Like, do you want to leave? And just being like, well, shit, like I don't know what I'm supposed to do in like that scenario, being like, well, yeah, I kind of want to leave, but like I don't really know what else I do in like at this moment in time. So that part was extremely frustrating. So their vision of what they thought the website should be had nothing to do with mine. And then the management changed at least every year, most of the time every 6 months, where the person that was supposed to be overseeing all of these music websites would just be somebody new. And they had a new idea, new vision, new traffic goals that they had to hit. And so they'd come in and start being like, well, we should do this and we should do this. And by that time, most of us were like, well, you're going to be gone in 6 months. So we're just going to ignore you and do what we want to do anyway, because you're not going to last. And they never did. So I don't know. It was very difficult to try to work with it.
We a friend of ours worked radio here in Southern Maine for a very long time, and that sounds very similar to the story that he told us. Right? He had a new group bought the radio station, and he had to listen to them. And now you need to do posts on Facebook and posts on Twitter, and then 6 months later, it'd be a different group of people that bought them. And is this similar but different? You're stuck in this scenario, this kind of Groundhog Day of, you get new people and they give you a different goal, and you've been like, I just get this other one up and running. Now you want me to do this?
Yeah.
It just that sounds like hell.
Yeah, that mixed with the aggressive ad sales team, that combo does not work well with my personality.
Especially for an audience that was used to consuming it a certain way, where it's like, I now go to AP and there's a pop-up, I forget the landing page that's just like the McDonald's ad. It's like, well, what's going on here?
Yeah.
What's this? Why is it talking to me? Why does it take like six extra minutes to download? Why is everything that used to be relatively fast now not? Like, how do I find the things that I was supposed to be looking for? Yeah, it was good and bad. Like that era of the music industry was interesting, because a lot of bands and a lot of labels were willing to spend money on advertising on websites like that at the time. Like they wanted to put if their new album on Tooth and Nail Records was coming out, they wanted to advertise on absolutepunk.net. Now with Facebook and Google and Instagram and everything dominating all of that sort of ad sales, it doesn't exist anymore. Like they don't advertise on a website like this anymore. Like they maybe advertise on like a Pitchfork or a Stereogum, but even most of that is programmatic ads at this point. So like that was good and bad at the same time. And I feel like the people like everyone running the ad department at Spin killed it, because they just kept, instead of like letting it be a good thing, which was very beneficial to everybody involved, the website operators, the users, and the advertisers, they just kept cramming more and more down every single time, until now everyone has a content blocker installed or just has ad blindness and ignores it anyway, because they're just so used to it being everywhere. So I still have a lot of anger towards everyone that ruined advertising online over the last 10 years.
Totally. And like, even especially on mobile. Oh my God. You open a website on mobile and you're like, yep, I'm never coming back. See ya.
You got to click through, a slideshow to see the top 10 albums of 2006 or something.
If I remember that, like that was another one they wanted us to do, and they were trying, like, Stereogum's doing really well with these slideshows. Could you figure out a way to do slideshows? I was like, do you read my website? Like, what slideshow am I going to do? It's like, we're talking about like Fall Out Boy releasing an album and Taking Back Sunday going on tour. It's like, how am I putting a slideshow together? Do you want me to slideshow every tour date? Like, what are you talking about?
That's ridiculous.
It reminds me of Nate's analogy of like beer and alcohol. It's like Bud Light coming out with a seltzer. It's like, no, if you are a real consumer of that, you can see right through it.
Yeah, that part was difficult.
Yeah, no, it's equivalent. I have a friend, or it's my father's friend. He has a company. It's called Link Soul. It's a kind of lifestyle golf company up here in Oceanside in San Diego. He used to formerly own the company John Ashworth. He sold to Callaway, and he was actually in a similar spot to you, Jason, where they told him he had creative control and the company was still going to run in his ethos. And no, completely different. They ran it into a completely different direction, a more old-fashioned direction that wasn't really transcending with what was going on in golf in that day, which is like Tiger Woods era.
Mm-hmm.
So he launched Link Soul, which is like a surf golf hybrid, which is the soul of what golf is today, which is more of like a lifestyle sport, and nailed something that Callaway couldn't even recognize. Like, oh, that's what's going on. So similar to what you're saying, like, there's a disconnect from the corporate level, and it's always identified by the end consumer as well as the content creators, us and you included, where it's like, all right, man, well, I will buy it back, or I could just do something totally new, and like you won't even see it coming, and you'll fall behind because this is what's actually going on.
And I think that what's interesting to me about all of that, and I didn't realize it at the time, but like that story, the story with Chorus and Absolute Punk, like it is basically the most common cliche of anybody selling a company ever. Like it's anybody that's ever done that sort of thing will say very similar things. Like there's very few cases that an acquisition or an acqui-hire or a merger or something that it actually ends up working well. And I mean, again, I was young at the time and thought like, well, I'm going to be the one that's going to make it different. Like this will work. Like these people understand me, not realizing within 6 months or a year that all the people that I was talking to would no longer work there, and it would be new people brought in from TMZ that I have to meet with and talk to. And I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. That I see why it doesn't ever work.
Totally. It's like having an organic food brand, USDA organic, and then selling to McDonald's. They're going to cut corners and it's not going to be organic anymore. Like it's what it is.
And it happens in every walk of life, right? I mean, obviously media, you'll see and read more about it, but it happens in every walk of life. Somebody gets acquired, a bunch of people are like, I don't like the way this new company does things, I'm out, and they go somewhere else. So that's definitely. So
and it's even more difficult with a website that, as you were saying, is so based on one person's voice or 3 or 4 people's voice. And it's like, and I used to say that to them. They were like, well, you could just leave and like, we'll just have somebody else. I was like, okay, like if you think that that's going to work, then go for it. Like, let's see what happens.
As a consumer for the last 17 years, nope.
That wouldn't have worked. So you started Chorus up in 2016. It's different than Absolute Punk was, but it's similar too, right? I mean, you do some of the same stuff, but it's not quite as hot and heavy as it was in maybe 2007, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the main idea that I've been thinking about is, for me, is I wanted to be happy and enjoy what I was doing every single day. And I got to the point where I wasn't. Like, I was burnt out. Like, I was so ready to be done. I would wake up in the morning and just be like, I can't believe this is what I'm going to have to go do today. There's going to be 16 different fights about 4 different things that I don't care about on the internet. Everyone's going to be mad about this. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to get yelled at by everybody above me. I'm going to be yelled at by people online because I didn't post about this band, or I did post about this band, or this is happening. And I was like, I felt so overwhelmed. And what I wanted was to get back to what I originally liked, which was writing about music, writing about the things that interested me, and not feeling the stress of having to be first with everything, right? Like back then it was like Blink-182 is about to release an album or about to release a song. The moment that hits the internet, like I need to be right after Twitter. Like it's on Twitter, I need to be there and be posting about it. And instead I wanted something where if you visit the website once a day, but you read top to bottom, you're going to get what you want to know, but you can visit it just one time a day and be like, these are the things that are going on today in the music scene, in the music industry, sometimes pop culture, sometimes entertainment that I find interesting. There's anywhere between 10 to 15, 20-ish posts on like a big day. There's still reviews, there's still music, there's still content that we're putting out there, but it's not based on this needs to be something that you're refreshing every 5 seconds, that is based on being first to every single story and not built on putting as many different stories out there as opposed to the ones that I'm interested in covering and wanting to write about, while still basically following the through line of what my entire musical tastes have been since 1998. Of like, I still cover pop punk music, I still cover the kind of interesting music to me here today. But I don't know, like somebody asked me a couple of days ago, they were like, well, would you ever bring absolutepunk.net back? And I was like, well, it would be the exact same thing I'm doing now. I don't want to do Absolute Punk the way it was. I would run it how I'm running Chorus, and you would just have like a red banner at the top. Like it'd be the same thing to me. Like I don't want to run Absolute Punk the way Absolute Punk was run in 2010. That is not interesting to me at 37. I'm too old.
It's so funny. You know what made me think about, Jason, is back in the heyday of AP, you guys were the Woj bomb. The Adrian, was it Wojnarowski, the NBA Twitter guy?
Yeah, exactly.
You were the Woj bomb
Or Schefter, right?
of the scene. Yeah, that's Adam Schefter, exactly. Without all those resources, right? I mean, you had
wanted to be. Yeah. I mean, that was the thing, is like, that was what we wanted the connections. We wanted to, we were messaging tour managers. We were talking to people that were going to shows, like what's going on with this band, talking to different managers, getting the scoops on like what was happening and like who was recording with who. And like, I mean, it was a lot of extra work to do all of that stuff. And now it's like, I've realized like, the moment it gets tweeted out or sent out in a press release anyway, it's everywhere. And it's so much easier just to read it in a press release and put it out when like the band wants it to come out. And there's not, because of streaming music and because of Twitter and social media, it's a lot, there's so much stuff out there for people to listen to. I don't think there's the same appetite for like breaking news about a album release in the same way that there used to be. Like back when, Amber Lynn was about to release something and everybody was like hyped up on like, what's Thrice going to do? When's the next Thrice announcement? Now it's like, well, I've got like 3,000 other bands I can listen to until Thrice decides to release something. And when they release something, it's going to pop up on my Spotify playlist. I'm going to know it's here. I'm going to be able to listen to it. So it's like, there isn't that same build up and release around all of that stuff because of how much, musical and social media content we have.
So I guess to that point, just you get a lot of stuff, and I'm sure you did back in 2006, 7, 8 too, in different media, in different forms. Today, it's probably a little easier. It all comes digitally, for the last 6 or 7 years. But it's changed from when you started to today, and how do you go about picking what you're going to listen to and review?
Yeah, it definitely has changed. It changed from when my college mailroom banned me from getting mail because I was getting too much mail sent to me in the dorm, and they told me I just can't get mail anymore, which was interesting. And I'm not sure that they could get away with that these days. To now everything comes digitally, which is great and not great, because I don't know, this just makes me sound lazy, but I'm lazy. I'm 37 and definitely lazy. And I get to the spot now where it's like stuff comes in and I'll see like a digital stream that shows up, and I'll look and I'll be like, can I download this, or do I have to stream it in the browser? And if I'm like, man, I have to stream this, I'm like, I could wait till it comes out. Like, I'll just wait. Like, I can wait till Friday. Like, that's fine. If it's a download and it's a band that I'm really excited about, I'll check it out. Sometimes I'll listen to promotional streams that come in, but a lot of times that's based on A, if I know the band, B, if I know the label, C, if I know the PR person that's sending it out. And then if I read something that's like recommended, like blah, 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 I'll be like, okay, like I like those bands. Let me listen to this. Or I'll listen to something. I can usually tell relatively quickly whether or not it's going to be something I should listen to more of, or if it's not really something I'm into. So a lot of it's changed, and it hasn't in the same way, because I mean, I remember getting CDs, I remember getting advanced albums, and my college roommate and I used to have a game where he would put them in his computer and listen to it, and we'd listen to it for a few seconds, and one of us would be like, nope, veto. He'd just pop it out, toss it, be like, nope, we're not listening to that anymore. And so we just go things really quickly, listen to stuff, and like, oh, that one's pretty good. Let's listen to that. Let's keep that and put that aside. This day and age, very similar to me. I listen to things. I listen to stuff that's recommended. I listen to stuff that the community itself is recommending. And if I see something getting really popular, like in our forums where people are like, oh, this new band's really good, I'll be like, okay, I'll check that out. That's why I checked out that Stand Atlantic album that came out last Friday, which is like a female fronted pop punk group from Australia, I want to say, which is pretty solid album. And it was like, not something I would have listened to otherwise. And all of a sudden that's on my radar. I'm like, this is pretty good. I enjoy this. So it's organic in a lot of ways, and different and not different. I don't know if that's a very good answer, but that's kind of where I'm at.
You know what it reminded me of is I was the metal director at my college radio station, and I would have to physically walk to the mailroom, and I'd always bring a few buddies because we'd have 5 or 6 bins a week of metal and adjacent albums. And there was almost an obligation to listen because someone physically mailed a CD to you. They went through that work to do that. And we did the same thing, Jason, where it was like, sometimes you knew 2 seconds in, you're like, no, love the hustle, but ain't going to happen.
Do you remember getting you'd get the CD, you'd usually get like a one sheet bio on paper, and then often they'd print the photo too. There were times where like we just get the big photo and we'd be like, I don't think this one's going to be for us. You know, I don't think we're a heavy metal band website. I think we'll put that one aside. We got so much mail.
Well, it was recommended if you like, or key tracks. It's like, well, let me decide what the key tracks are.
For a while there, everybody recommended if you like Fall Out Boy. I'd get that constantly. I'd be like, recommend if you like Fall Out Boy. Like, sounds nothing like Fall Out Boy. It was like, there's just every single thing that I was getting sent was just like, no, if you like Fall Out Boy, you're gonna like this band. It was like, this band has a ukulele. Like,
Not even close.
yeah.
You know what's funny is I was actually at one of the record labels sending these products to you, so it's pretty funny to hear it on all sides.
That's great.
I mean, I still get people asking me like now of like, what's the trick to get you to listen to something? And it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know the answer to that. Like, sometimes somebody will send me something and the PR email that I get, something just grabs my eye and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. Or like, it's worded in a funny way, or like the song title grabs me and I'm like, I'll check that out. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I'm willing to spend a little bit longer with it. And there's other times where I'm just browsing Twitter and I just happen to see a band name and I'm like, oh, what's this Meet Me at the Altar band? And I'll check them out. And I'm like, this is really, really good. And it just completely random, complete happenstance. And nobody ever sent me anything about it. It's just, I don't know. It's different basically every time.
What about visuals, Jason? Like, I was talking about beer earlier. I buy beer basically on the label. Do you ever just see some artwork? You're like, oh, I'll check this out just because it looks rad. So whatever.
I don't know, like, because with the ability to look at it on like Apple Music every week, when you get the little like Discover Weekly playlist that has like a bunch of stuff on it. A lot of times I'll scan through to see names that I recognize or names that I've read versus looking at the actual album art. I think that I have more recognition with like, I've seen this name multiple times, so therefore I'm gonna like be drawn to that versus seeing something specific. There are times though, like I'll see a really cool album cover and I'm like, oh, like I'll check that out. That looks like something that might be in my wheelhouse. But I think that was much more of a thing for me back when I was going to the store to buy CDs, because I absolutely remember buying CDs based on like a little sticker in the corner being like, this sounds like blah blah blah, and be like, okay. Or like we pick one up, like you pick up a Millencolin CD and you're like, this looks like a punk album, like this looks like right in my wheelhouse, I'm grabbing this. So like I'm pretty sure that's how I bought Hello Rockview the first time. I was like, this looks exactly like something that's going to be right in my musical wheelhouse.
That is funny. Yeah, the record store experience with for fans of, or the actual album cover. So getting back to like, you're getting a slew of albums coming in, whether it's back in the day with physical media or nowadays digitally, and you make the decision that you're going to review the album. Not all those album reviews are positive. So how do you, because over the years there have been some, I would say, critical or harsh or tough reviews. How do you approach those? Because I mean, that there can be consequences from those, right?
Yeah, back in the day, I was much more willing to want to write a lot about something I didn't like. Like, maybe just being 17 and full of piss and anger and just being a dick online. Like that was part of it. It was just like, well, I don't like this and I'm willing to talk about it more. As I've gotten older, I still have those opinions. I still will listen to something and be like, well, this is trash, but I'm less likely to want to spend my time writing a lot about it. I'm willing to say, be it in a newsletter blurb, be it on a podcast, be it like in the forums in passing, be like, yeah, I don't like this and this is why. And if somebody wants to talk about it, like I will expand upon it, but I get less enjoyment of being like, I want to write 1,500 words about something that either I'm mediocre on or actively dislike. Because I find more enjoyment personally to write about something that I'm really passionate about in the opposite way, where I'm listening to something and I'm like, this is impacting my life in a big way. I really like this. I think other people should listen to it because they're either doing something new and unique, or they're doing something that I think will resonate with people and be the kind of album that is emotionally connective with them. And those are the bands and the albums and stuff that I feel much more drawn to wanting to talk about this day and age, even if I still have, negative opinions about other things. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I mean, if you're passionate about something and you like the music and you put it out there like that, it can be persuasive. So you've turned me into some stuff that way with the podcast back in the day. Kind of a sidestep on this, but very similar. How do you go about picking? People send you stuff. There's a spot on the website where you can send stuff to news to get put up on the website, and we've done it a couple times. And you did pick the Scott Russo interview up and posted on there, which many thanks for that. How do you go about picking those things?
A lot of it's just based on my life experience and the stuff that either I'm into or the stuff that I know about. So like, for example, like if I had never heard of your podcast and it wasn't one that I had been on my radar, but obviously big Unwritten Law fan. I've listened to Unwritten Law since high school. So it's like, I saw that and I was like, that's something that I'm interested in. That's something I want to listen to. That's something that I think that people that read my website would be interested in. And a lot of it is just based on taste and feel of what do I like? What am I into? And I tried to write the website from the mentality of, if I was just the reader, the only person that was reading it, what would I want to read on a daily basis? What would I want to know about everything that's going on out there in the music world? What would I want that distilled down into? And I write as though I'm the one reading it. So I write as though this is what I would find interesting in a given day. And I've found that a lot of people that have followed what I write now over the years have similar taste to me in that realm, and that that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for me to write about every single thing, and they're not looking to me to necessarily find 30 new different bands for them to listen to on any given day. They know what they like, and a lot of times it's similar to what my tastes have been like, and so they trust me as kind of that media filter to distill down everything else that's going on into this 10 to 15 to 30 different news stories on any given day.
Nice.
So yeah, most of it's feel like, I mean, that's it. I wish that there was a better system. I wish I could say like, well, actually I follow this flow chart and that's how I know exactly what to post about. But I just don't, like, a lot. And like, there's some days where I'll read something and be like, maybe it just doesn't feel right today. And I'll wait, post it a couple of days later because we've got a bunch of other stuff going on. And then there's days where certain things just bubble up or don't come to me, and I'm like, man, well, I missed that. I really wish I would have been able to post about it, and then post about it the next day and stuff. It's just, it really at this point has become just second nature of the things that I read and go, yep, that one. No, not that one.
I mean, that makes sense for me. I know that's kind of how we process our social media feeds and stuff like that, where we're just, what's going on today? If there's something that we all are into that's a big news story, we post about it. If not, then we're like, nah, let's find something else that we're all into that maybe happen around now. So that makes sense.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to it. It's like pros, you're independent. Like you said, Jason, you're kind of just doing it organically. So you're not trying to like get any pressure from anyone. If this is something that stands out to me, I'm going to go with it. Otherwise I'm not. And that makes it relatable. In other words, it's not like a plastic site where you're like, all right, obviously this is being fed to me by Epic Records and they want me to click on this and read it and jump on board. At the same time, we have this segment on the podcast called Show Regret. And a lot of show regret goes in tandem with the fact that, bands may have released so-and-so fourth album and would have been epic to catch them on that run. So I wondered, are you having a lot of fun, like just going through old content based on like, oh shit, this was probably something that someone was like bugging me to check out and I just didn't. And now I'm checking it out and I'm like really liking it.
Trying to think if there's anything off the top of my head that I can think about in that way. I think more than like hearing things from back in the day that I was like, oh, I wish I would have listened to that, because I was listening to most everything that was being posted about at any given time. I listened to from like 2005 to, I want to say 2010, 2012, around that time, I was consuming more music than any human being should ever be consuming. Like I was listening to so much music all of the time, constantly. Lived by myself and could, so I did, and I was checking out new things. If anybody was like, oh, this band, just like, okay, I'm gonna listen to it, I'm gonna listen to this. And then around 2012, something like that, I decided to try to consciously limit how much music I was consuming and be like, I want to go back to what it felt like when I first got into music, and when I could spend all day with one CD because I had one CD player and I didn't bring a disc folder with anything else in it. So I'm only listening to this, and I felt a deeper, longer connection with the music because of it. I had one CD that could go in my car, one CD that could go with me into school with my headphones, and that was kind of what I was listening to. So I started trying to get back to that. So I would not say that I have necessarily any like regret of not listening to anything. What I think that my biggest regret from some of that absolute punk era stuff, and now looking back on it, is that I was afraid to actually talk about things that I really liked at the time because I was afraid of the online backlash. So like one example would be Paramore. Another example would probably be some of those all-time low records for a little while, of stuff that was like exceptionally poppy or maybe not looked at as quote cool at the time. And so I was like, I kind of slagged on Paramore, even in the review that like the review I wrote for it is overwhelmingly positive, but I have some very dumb one-liners in there that I'm like, well, you're a fucking idiot. Why did you write that? Like just like stuff that like I was doing based on the idea that I was trying to capture, like, I want some like scene credibility here, or like, this isn't cool. Right. And like, even with like reviewing albums or talking about like Fall Out Boy and putting them on like an end of the year list and like dropping them down a few more spots than I probably would have had them, because I didn't want to put that out into the world and deal with the online bashing of like, oh, you like Fall Out Boy, like, ha ha ha, I'm going to make fun of you about it. And so I think that is more of the regret that I have, is that I was not as, I didn't stand up for myself and what my musical tastes actually were at the time in certain occasions.
That's while you were talking, Jason, it made me think of, you just said like the single album experience, like the front to back album experience. And we, I don't know if it was last week or the week before on our This Weekly podcast, we talked about the CEO of Spotify's comments on quote unquote the continuous music experience. And I know you had comments on it, but it made me think, like, for the average chorus FM band, I don't know if that would work. And it almost makes me think of, is it Daniel Ack, I think his name is. He is to the audience he's making these comments to, same as Spin was making it to you, where it's like, dude, you're so disconnected. Like, imagine Jimmy Eat World releasing a weekly song. It's just like, it ain't gonna work,
Yeah, and I think that was what bugged me about when I read those comments. Was, first of all, it was like he was comparing Taylor Swift releasing Folklore at the time, and like, look how she's built this entire thing with her fan base. Like, Taylor Swift's one of one, man. Like, no one else. No, there's the reason why she's the largest recording artist in the world. Like, what are you talking about? Like, not everyone can do something like that. And I think that it also does. It is so much more geared towards, what is popular right now in the music scene or the music world, and not necessarily what a lot of people our age and maybe a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older, want to experience with music. And I like something like that from Jimmy World just wouldn't work. Like, you would not be able to continually do that and keep the fan base that you have engaged enough to make that work. But at the same time, like, I worry that we are losing that full album experience because people aren't really willing or interested in spending the time with that many songs continually. And that's been something that I've fretted about for a while, as somebody that really enjoys listening to the perfectly sequenced, perfectly put together album and getting time to spend with it. I realize that bands that release EPs or singles and constantly do that, I just don't go back to them as much. Even bands I really like there's a band called Nightly that is kind of like this 80s synthy throwback band, but all they've been releasing so far is singles. And I think they've released like 9 of them, and they're all really good. But I never really dive in and listen to them because it's like, how do I have to make a playlist for this? Can I kind of put them all together? How do I get this to work? And it's not like an album I can be like, I'm hitting play, and for the next 45 minutes, I don't have to do anything.
Right.
And I don't know, it's interesting to me because I know that is what the music industry is doing, and I know that it is popular, and I can see the younger generation and the TikTok generation of like,
Yep.
I'm going through this stuff so fast, and it's where I start seeing my age and just being like, I guess I'm the old man with his record player now, but I don't know, it is what I am. I can't really change that.
We can totally relate to that though, because we're the same way. We just, and maybe we're aging out a little bit, but at the same time, there are still going to be bands that the full album experience works for. So I think that, the Jimmy Eat Worlds, stuff like that is going to continue to be able to put that stuff out for their fans. And maybe they've aged along with us, and we can continue to just kind of ride off into the sunset that way, I guess.
And like back when, so take Thrice's Artist in the Ambulance. I know track 5 or 6 is Paper Tigers, but in this era, you don't know
6.
song names. You don't. I don't know song names for albums I'd stream. To be honest with you, more recent stuff.
Yeah, you couldn't. Right, if you ask me right now, like to even name, I could maybe do 5 of like say Jimmy Eat World Surviving. I think I could do a couple of the singles, and I think I'd be out after that because I don't look at them. Like I have a shortcut key on my keyboard where I can hit it and it'll pop up on in a little notification what's playing, so I can like try to learn the song names because I often want to know. I'm like, what is that? And it's a quick, easy way for me to be able to be like look up in the corner and be like, okay, that's what that is. And even with that, I've lost the idea to do that. And if you would have asked me, 1999 or whatever, like tell me the track listing for Blink-182's Enema of the State, I could have done it frontwards, backwards, alphabetically, any single way you want me to do it. I would have been able to do that. And right now I can't tell you the track listing for one of my favorite albums of the past couple of years. So that's interesting to me.
That's some real nerdery, Jason.
I know.
That's what we call it, nerdery, music nerdery.
Yeah.
That's what this whole podcast is.
That's like
Pretty
our
much.
geek term. But it made me think when we were talking about like the mass consumption of releasing music. Well, part of the music appreciation stems from the place and time when it came out. Mm-hmm. So if you're in high school and Enema of the State comes out and you see it in American Pie, and you're also in that age group of you're kind of going through those stages of growth, it's like it's a perfect storm. So if you're putting out those songs as essentially like disposable, I'm going to compare it to like disposable income, just like throwing it around, it doesn't have the same feeling and connotation. And therefore a band like Blink-182 putting out a single every 2 weeks, it's just going to be like, oh, okay. I mean, it's just not hitting the same. And so Blink-182 holds a special place because the time and place that they grew. I mean, we were all in high school. We were all like, and you too, Jason, all included. Like we were just like going through the things they were talking about in the songs. It was immaculate, basically.
I agree.
One thing where, that culmination of songs coming together does fit, where you might see it on like a Spotify, this is Blink-182, and they have like their top like 30 songs as a playlist, is a live show. And we obviously love live shows here. It's one bond that we all have together is the amount of money that we've spent on live shows. And we've joked around and the lengths that we've gone to go to live shows against all odds. We have so many segments on this because it's such a geeky thing, and especially geeky now that we can't even like go to shows.
Yeah.
So with that said, are you someone that goes to a live shows or obviously had in the past, or?
Like my heyday of live shows was definitely college. That was definitely the time when I was going all the time, living in going to college in Southern California. We would catch every single tour that came through, and that was the era for me that I loved the most of live music. Then when I moved back home and started working more, and then my friends got real jobs, that was when it was a lot harder to get people to want to go to shows with me. And it's become over the last couple of years more of a if it's a band that I haven't seen in a long time, or like specifically want to see like their specific show, like either it's a farewell show or a reunion show or something like that, I'll find the time and place to make sure to do it. But I've gone to a lot fewer as time's gone on, and it's become more of a like one-off event of being like, well, I either have never seen the band, like for example, I remember going to see the 1975 on one of their very tiny first tours through Portland. And I was like, this band's going to be huge. I need to go see these guys when they're playing the Doug Fir and there's like 300 people here, and did. And it was awesome. Or, seeing like a really nice, intimate Noah Gunderson show. And it's playing in a tiny little basement, just him and a guitar. And those are the kind of things that I'm more drawn to than, hey, what's going on Friday at, the Roseland? Well, let's just go check it out. There's this tour. Oh, I like a couple of these bands. Let's just go. And that was a specific time in my life. And now I feel like everything, being married, being older, it's planned out in a much deeper way that with when and how I can get to a show these days.
I'm only laughing, Jason, because we talk about this on the podcast where it's like, well, when I was 22 years old, yeah, obviously I could go to anything. I was making a little bit of money and I could kind of see whatever I wanted, and cost of living was substantially cheaper then. And now as I'm getting older, I have more responsibilities, and, things take precedent over going to a random, yellow card show for the millionth time, even though I really, really, really wanted to go to that show. So it's just like, times change. So it is what it is.
You'd get asked, and especially at that time, you'd get asked by your friends. They'd be like, "Hey, this band's coming in town. You want to go?" It's like, "Yeah, of course." It's like, I haven't been asked by a friend if I want to go see a show in at least a decade at this point. They're like, "Oh, we have kids and a mortgage. Leave me alone." Like, no, we're going to bed at like 8:00. What are you talking about?
I always ask myself, how the hell do we come up with all this money? Like, I look at all my ticket stubs because we keep all those because we're geeks and nerds. But it's like, how did I come up with that?
I look back on it too. I'm like, I have so many different ticket stubs just sitting right here next to the computer, and just like some of them were, even back then, seeing U2 in 2009, or seeing Bruce Springsteen in 2008, spending $90 on that. Like, I had no money. How did I pull that off?
That was the perk of that was the perk of running AbsolutePunk.net. I didn't have to pay for many tickets.
Nice. Well, we were fortunate when stuff would come to Portland, Maine, which was occasionally second leg. A lot of times we get stuff. Our friend working at the radio station, so we get to see a decent amount that way, which is nice.
Yeah.
But not enough. Obviously, we wanted more.
It's awesome. One thing that I was thinking about when you were mentioning the album experience and what the next generation is going to do with one band or one artist that I think is going to continue that thread is I look at what like Billie Eilish is doing and seeing how popular that she is and what she's been able to capture. And I listened to her album, and that to me does not feel like something that was haphazardly put together. That feels very intentional, feels very artistic, feels very thought out. And I do think, I just wanted to make sure that I clarify that I do think that is something that can be continued on to this generation and the next, and that some artists specifically are trying to keep that tradition alive.
Yep, I agree.
And it resonates too. Like I haven't seeked out her stuff, but I've heard enough where I could kind of tell that I'd be into it. So the fact that you kind of co-signed it, I'll check it out. It's good. I mean, it's good in that way to me, of being like, you can see where it came from and why kids today are into it. It's not necessarily something that I toss on any given day to listen to, but I still enjoy. I don't know. I've liked that cross section of alternative and popular. That's obviously what I grew up with, was like Blink-182 being this weird little band that got massive, Fall Out Boy being this little Chicago band that got massive, My Chemical Romance, like these bands that end up becoming extremely mainstream, but have this like little alternative edge and community around them before it ever happens. And so I'm still interested in like, what are kids listening to today? And sometimes I listen to stuff and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here. Like, I don't even really understand why this is popular. And then there's times where I'll listen to things and like, I think Billy's a good example of being like, I 100% understand why this is massive. Like this totally makes sense and resonates. And I can see why, if I was a teenager, I would be very into this type of thing.
Totally.
Yeah. It's undeniable, Jason. I mean, I didn't know a whole lot about her music, but I have a friend here, a couple actually, they're from Germany, and they turned me on to her. And I was, kind of doing the thing we were alluding to earlier, where I was like, some people were kind of pressuring me, like, hey, check this out, it's really good. I was kind of like, yeah, maybe I've heard that name in the headlines, so, it might not be my cup of tea, but I'll check it out eventually. And then these friends told me like, no, it actually has some really good roots to it. And, she talks about mental illness and she lives with her parents, and it's just really good, genuine music, even though it's like a top 40 artist. I'm like, interesting. Okay, so I'll check it out, because it reminded me of like Nirvana, like their top 40, but you know, they're coming from some serious grassroots in the Seattle grunge scene, which I'm obsessed with. Anyone that's listening to Potty Slave kind of knows that's where I'm coming from, at least on a grassroots music appreciation standpoint. So yeah, I think that hit something with what's going on now. I mean, a lot of restaurants that I visit or used to visit prior to COVID were alluding to some kind of craft, like urban wood or like seaweed and gravel. Like there's always some kind of like tangible, like old school like thing to make sure we're not being too futuristic, because things are just like transforming so quickly. And it kind of relates to where we're at today with COVID. Things are a little weird right now. We don't really know what's going to happen, but we keep seeing these headlines on, you know, futuristic and future forward thinking statements on where things are going to be maybe 2021. A lot of the shows we have tickets for are postponed to 2021. Like everything's just going to magically go back to normal, which would be great because we love the live music experience, as we're talking about here today. Where do you see music coming back, both in a tangible standpoint, but also a live music standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of these artists experimenting with different things even right now. I thought it was cool that Andrew McMahon was doing like a drive-in show where everyone could show up in cars and everyone's socially distanced, and you're trying to do that. And I think that watching some of the experimentation around it is going to be what starts, and people are going to try different things, and some of it's going to work and some of it's not going to work. And it's going to be a massive failure, or there's going to be ones where it's like, oh, actually, like we can do this. Because I do think that, like, I don't know, looking at everything again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what I'm talking about here, but it does feel like even 2021 is potentially like still fraught with the idea of like, are people really going to want to be in a tiny room with a bunch of other people that close together? Like, is that going to be something that everyone's willing to sign up for pre-vaccine? Exactly. I know, like, I'm not specifically looking forward to doing something like that. Like, and I really like live music and I really like going to shows and supporting bands. And it's like, that's not something that would be high up on my list to do. So I feel like things that are in that realm are going to be in trouble for a while, because I know that a lot of artists make money on touring. And I think that touring is going to be very difficult to get back off the ground. And that's before even looking at what venues still exist at the end of all of this, and how many of them are going to either have to be forced to completely shut down or not have any actual income to be able to pay the bands when they come through anyway. So I don't know. I am not super optimistic about any of it, especially anytime soon. And I feel really bad for a bunch of bands that, I mean, I said this when this all began, that I have like a fear that a bunch of middle to mid-sized bands might not make it out of it alive, because by the end of all of it, they just will not be financially viable, and or have just decided, screw this, like I'm just going to go get whatever job I can that has health insurance right now. And it's going to take a while to build up that sort of like the mental and emotional ability to want to start a band again. I think could be a couple years down the road, because everyone will see this and see the economy and see the massive crash that everybody's dealing with, and not be able to just not have the motivation or even ability to do it. And that's even before talking about, if the economy doesn't turn around, people having the disposable income to go to shows, you know, like, totally. I don't know. It doesn't look good. Like, unfortunately, I wish I like had good feelings about it, but I just don't at the moment. And I think a lot of it is just based on, you know, being in quarantine for the last few months anyway, and being like, I don't, especially without having any faith in our government systems to get us out of it anyway. So it's just like, well, I don't know. This could go on for freaking ever, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
No, Jason, I mean, you bring up a great point. My brother lived in Portland, Oregon for a while, so I stayed with him for a few months, literally crashed on his couch, just kind of get a sense for Portland, Oregon. I really like that town, that city, by the way. And actually went to Douglas to see a show. I saw a Gift of Gab, MC, hip-hop artist. Yeah. Awesome show. Went with a high school friend, Jess, that moved out there from South Portland. And I was like, oh, this is a super cool club. If I lived here, I would see every show here. And Portland's got so many cool venues. The McNimon's brothers.
McMinimans? Yeah. McMinimans?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
They have all those cool, they have like all those collections of old cinemas and
Yeah, one of those bars is where I met my wife.
Oh, rad. Nice. Yeah, no, it's a cool collection. They have like a hybrid of like music venues and craft beer. It's like kind of two of the best things in the world. But it just made me think like those venues, like I love, and what you're saying is what we are being completely transparent about. We're not trying to like hide the fact that like maybe some of these like iconic venues and like former cinemas turned into music venues like in Portland, Oregon, with that franchise will dissipate just because it's just not, unfortunately, not viable. It's an old school model. These theaters were built in the 1920s at the turn of the century, and we're 2020 now. I mean, we're about to install microchips into our brain in about a year.
Okay, Elon.
Yeah, I'm always plugging the guy. So with that said, we always plug venues that we really appreciate here. We've contributed to GoFundMe's. We showcase some of our favorite memories on show experiences that kind of give context to these amazing albums. And it's kind of like this perfect storm of like, oh man, I saw this band on this album at this venue. Is there a favorite, let's say like 3 venues for you? Doesn't even have to be specific to the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, the hard one is that like the shows that I remember the most in Portland, the venue doesn't exist anymore, so that's too bad. But the other ones that I spent most of my time at were in Southern California. So it was at like the Chain Reaction or Hollywood. And here in Portland, the Crystal Ballroom, which is in McMinimans, has been one that has quite a few different bands and artists that I've seen over the years. And I think that's the difference between how I feel about music and stuff now and what shows I go to is since a lot of times I'm waiting for like the one big artist that comes through, it's basically always at 1 or 2 different venues. And back in the day, I remember going to 6, 7, 8, 9. There was venues all over the place that were doing things and throwing different shows. And maybe that still exists and I just no longer cool. So I don't know where they're going on. But I feel like most of the stuff I see these days are just within a small group of different things, and that's before we're getting out to the the big reunion stuff that goes through and is playing like an amphitheater or something like that.
Yeah, I love I went to Chain Reaction last summer. I flew out there for Crime and Stereo.
Nice.
Their 3-show run. I went with my dad. He
That's
loved
awesome. Yep, that's a great tiny little venue. I saw many bands there over the years.
Yeah, love that place. So Jason, we like to do kind of a lightning round, like a quick hitter questions to wrap us up here. So we have kind of 1 sentence, 1 word answer type questions that we're super curious about. So I'll get us started. Favorite piece of nerdery. So physical media. So I don't want to steer you any direction, but gold record, piece of vinyl, anything like that. So what's your favorite?
Oh yeah, it's definitely the Fall Out Boy From Under the Cork Tree platinum record that I have. That's
awesome.
That one, I remember them sending that to me for the first time. I had no idea it was coming, and opened that up, and it was just like that was a goal/dream of mine forever to be like I want to put like a gold record on the wall, and that was the first one I got, and that blew me away. And to this day, when I look up and see it when I'm working, I'm like, okay, like this has been a pretty good career.
Nice, that's awesome.
I collect gold records, but unfortunately, they're not addressed to me. They're the random dudes that I get off eBay.
That's awesome.
I bet you have a big collection of those.
1, 2, 3, 5.
Nice. That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm on a tangent. Who are they? You Fall Out Boy? Who else?
Fall Out Boy have the Boys Like Girls self-titled album, Under Oath, Define the Great Line.
Ooh, nice.
And then there's All Time Lows, Dear Maria, Count Me In. It's the single. That one went gold. And then I have Brand New's Deja Entendu, and it's gold as well.
Nice. That's pretty sick.
Yeah, so those ones are pretty fun.
You want to hear something super nerdy? When I was in high school, I don't think anyone here knows this, which is funny.
Really?
Jason doesn't.
Even though you guys went to my my room in high school and stuff, I used to hang up posters, but I used to also make almost like a fake RIAA certified platinum album plaques. So I'd put like a CD or even like a demo like CD, flip it backwards, and then put the album cover, get it signed by the band, and like a press photo of the band, and then frame it and put it on my wall. That'd be kind of
awesome. It's a great little DIY art project right there.
And that's totally Nate. And he told us last week a story and I've known Nate for 25 years, and he told me a story last week I hadn't heard. He lied about having an interview with Chris Cornell and got backstage and interviewed him in his dressing room in New York, like 12 years ago, 13 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Backstage.
He's that guy. Plaza. He always gets stuff signed. He finds a way in, always.
I've done some cool shit, but you just got to do it. That's like what we're
Yeah.
kind of the theme of tonight.
So, okay, so you talking about shows in Southern California at one of those tiny rooms. Give us one of your favorites from back then.
Yeah, favorite show.
Oh man, I saw it would have been the Starting Line, Midtown, Finch, and Thrice. I think. I think that was. I think that was all of the. And I think it was like I forgot who the tour actually was, and one of the bands jumped on it last minute. I think it was like Starting Line, Thrice, and Finch, and Midtown. Like in the middle of like just we're like, oh, we'll jump on that show and played it. So that's got to be it.
Awesome.
There was a bunch. I saw. What else did I see way back in the day that I really liked? I mean, that Pop Disaster tour with Blink-182, Green Day, Jimmy Eat World. That one was that was still one of the better like big name tours that I can remember as well.
Show regret for me.
Oh yeah.
AKA, I wish I was at that show. Speaking of Blink, we were thinking. I'm actually down here in San Diego. I live in Encinitas, so actually, I saw Tom DeLonge today ride on his motorcycle, and I was like, I'm so like desensitized now. I just like see him, I'm like, oh, that's Tom DeLonge. That's wow, crazy. We had this like thing come up recently that we were talking about mainly through text is if Matt Skiba didn't come into the fold from Alkaline Trio, like who would be your dream like Tom DeLonge replacement for Blink-182?
I've thought about this before and I forgot what answer I came up with. Nice. Because I definitely had thought about it, and my answer would be I want somebody more vocally distinct than Matt is with Mark. I like these last couple albums that they've done, but I still feel like the dichotomy between Tom and Mark's voice was so strong that was a big part of what I liked about their music. And I don't remember who I came up with that I thought would work really well. I was actually surprised by how well Alex from All Time Low and Mark work well together on that Simple Creatures project.
Oh, totally.
Actually, they harmonize pretty well together, but I think I'd want something in a different register. A little, not like, I don't want it to be like a Tom DeLonge copycat, like, but somebody that maybe like a female artist that could work really well. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I have nothing off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I couldn't even think of one, to be honest. It was just like all over the map.
All right, so Jimmy Eat World, we've talked about them a little bit. Clarity, Bleed American, Futures, rank them.
Futures, Clarity, Bleed American. Futures is arguably one of my favorite albums of all time, so I have to go with that. And I love Bleed American a lot, and it'd be pretty close to tied, but I have to put Clarity above it just because of how long I've spent with that album over the years.
Fair. Futures is mine, and I actually was talking to these guys last night about it. I'm like, guys, Futures, it's Futures. Sorry.
Yeah, Futures is my favorite Jimmy Eat World album.
Yeah, I agree. We just did an appreciation post on Futures. How it's a front to back, and it's so good.
It's just so good.
There's no skips. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So Jason, this next one, we definitely did our homework, and I'm the one that can relate to this question, which is.
I love this question, and you'll understand why.
It's not music related. Worst Yankees free agent signing or signing in general: Jacoby Ellsbury, Mark Teixeira, or Giancarlo Stanton.
I'd say Ellsbury. They paid way too much money. He's been sitting around for too long. Man, I'm really bummed out right now because Stanton just got hurt again and got hurt 3 days ago, something like that, and has been out. And he was having a really good season. And it's hard for me to shit on Tex just because I've always liked him. So it has to be Jacob Ellsbury.
Well, and you won a World Series with Tex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And the jury's out on Stanton still because you still have him, and you may win one with him too.
Ellsbury's
got to be it.
I don't know what's going on with Stanton, man. Like he's got too much muscle. Like how are you that perfect of a specimen as a human being and yet can consistently be hurt? It's like I walk up the stairs and I'm out of breath, but like I've never strained anything.
I've always wondered if it's the way he swings. He almost swings down on it where it's like not conventional. Yeah.
I'm a Sox fan, so I was happy you took Jacoby off our hands at the end of that. I was like, we got what we needed out of that guy. Thank you.
And we got the scraps. Amazing. Yeah, I'm the Yankees fan living in the Northeast in Red Sox territory. So it's
it's hard. Well, this year it's okay. They got rid of Mookie Betts.
We're terrible.
You can just make fun of that the whole time.
That was so dumb. Oh boy. Yep. And okay, I gotta ask you, you're a Trailblazers fan?
Yes.
They got a chance against the Lakers, right?
I think so. I mean, I think thing about the Trailblazers is, one, nobody wants to piss off Damian Lillard in the bubble because he is going to tear out your heart. Second of all, I don't think the Lakers have anyone that can contain the Blazers guards. Like, Rondo's hurt, Avery Bradley's out. Who's guarding them? Like, who's guarding CJ and Dame? I don't think they have anyone. And they're finally actually healthy, which you can finally see because they're actually able to play with Nurk, and Collins is back, and they finally have a full lineup. And we know with the new resurgence of Gary Trent Jr. that's come out of nowhere. Like, I would not. If I'm the Lakers, I don't want to see him in the first round. That said, I don't think I'd pick him. Like, I don't think that if somebody was like gun to head, you have to take them. I don't think I would, but because we also don't have anyone that can match up with AD or LeBron, so I'm not really looking forward to seeing Whiteside out there just getting dunked on by Anthony Davis for
that's gonna happen
all the time. Dwight Howard, like it's not going to go well. So I don't think I'd pick them, but I think that if they get in there and they have a chance, like Lillard's been on fire lately.
He's on fire.
I do not think the Lakers want to see them. That's for sure.
No, and we're big Celtics fans here, so I'm rooting for
Jason
Portland.
Tatum, best name in basketball.
Oh, dude, he is so. And you're a Duke guy, right? So he is awesome. I was so happy they traded down and got him. I was like, this is the best.
I love that kid.
Yeah, he's very, very good, and I hope he stays for a very long time. Him and Brown together have been nice. Celtics have. We're young. We're all right. We get a chance.
Yeah, I saw Stevens just signed a extension today.
Yeah, yep.
So you got him locked up forever. Yeah, they got a nice young core.
Oh yeah.
And with no home court advantage, really, in the bubble, anything's possible.
And they're playing the Sixers, and Ben Simmons is out, and it looks like Embiid just got hurt again. Yeah, just saw that.
The Raptors are good, though. I don't know how they do
the
it.
Raptors
They're
are
still
good.
Yeah. And then Giannis, he gets every call. He only got one game suspended. I mean, we're going off the rails here, guys. This is the biggest tangent we've ever had. But
going full into the basketball and sports stuff.
Yeah, Giannis only getting one game is ridiculous.
Yeah, I saw that last night. Yeah. DeMarcus Cousins would have been out for 3 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, Jason, I think what we've realized is you could be the fourth member of this podcast if you.
I can come on all the time. It'll be fun.
Yeah, man.
That's what I like about, and it's hard to find people, and this is what I've even said about writing and stuff, is like find people that have similar tastes, similar things that you're into that you want to talk about. But once you do, it's so easy to fall into that sort of like friendship sort of things. You're like, oh, you like this, I like this, we can talk about these sort of things. And that's the kind of been the entire goal of what I've wanted to do online anyways, have those kind of conversations and meet like-minded people to be able to jump from, the music forum where people are talking about Blink-182 to the NBA thread where everyone's, either a giant Bucks fan or shitting on James Harden and what he did tonight and, stuff like that. And being able to have all of those things back and forth, I think is a big reason why I like the community that we have.
It's awesome.
Totally. We would have been friends in high school.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've been going to those. For us, it would have been the State Theater, a tiny little venue in Portland, Maine that we would have been all living at every other night of the week. So
what's your favorite show you ever saw then? I need to know, how would you have answered that one? Like favorite tiny show?
Who wants to go first?
The first one this probably isn't the top, but first one that comes to mind, the year would have been freshman year of college, so 03, 04. It was Mest headlining, which doesn't really do anything for me as much, but there was a band opening. So listen to the context here. Opening for Mest.
I know who it is.
Fall Out Boy.
Yep, I remember that tour.
And they signed bar napkins for me. And Pete Wentz put... I go, Pete, can you, my sister's a big fan. This was when the Take This to Your Grave came out. I go, Pete, my sister's a big fan. So he writes on the napkin, I bet your sister's hot, and hands it to me. And I think I still have it.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. You never gave it to your sister?
I can't remember.
Send her a picture.
And I think Patrick just wrote puppies or something.
Sounds right. I remember that tour.
Yeah. That was mine. You guys want to go?
You got one, Nate? I'm still thinking.
Yeah, I have two, because you said small show, Jason.
Yeah, small show. That's where I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I have two as it relates to at least pop punk. So for like a big show, since we're all like the same age group, 2000 Warped Tour, I was like, holy shit, this is like totally my scene. And I didn't even know it, even though I had like obviously like led up to it, but like being there, $20 ticket, seeing every amazing punk band and like the whole culture, I was like, oh man, I should have grown up in Southern California. You know what I mean? Or something like that. And so that was like
who did you see that you loved? Do you remember?
I really liked, I think like what my favorite band walking out of there was Suicide Machines.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was like, these guys are rad. Actually, I know you're an MXPX fan. MXPX stood out. No Effects were on there on that bill.
God,
Fat
those
Mike was doing
early
some.
tours are crazy.
Oh my god, it was so good. It was the turn. It was 2000. So like,
Yeah.
my buddy had just gone to 99 and said like Blink had played there, and then Blink blew up in 2000. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
shit, I have to make it to 2000, especially
That's
for 20
awesome.
bucks. Shit,
Yeah.
20 bucks is nothing for a festival. Even then, even with inflation. For a small gig, there's a club in Portland, Asylum, which has rebranded and expanded since. But back in the day, it used to be this small all ages club that then transformed to a 21 plus. But at the time, this is also year 2000, I want to say, maybe 99. I saw Goldfinger, The Urge, and also Mest. And that was
wow.
like my favorite small club show. And I remember being like, oh man, Goldfinger is awesome. And I was a
Goldfinger's
huge
great
Urge
live.
fan too. Yeah, that was a rad show.
Two
I skied that
Mest
day.
shows at the same time. Interesting. Is this secret Mest fan club going on over here?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's gonna break out "What's the Dealio" as the theme song. At the
Oh,
end
that
of
could
the
happen.
song.
Those were played in the cars back then. I could
Cadillac.
Mine hasn't aged super well, and you can see over my shoulder here a poster of, but seeing Atmosphere in the space. What does the space hold, guys?
200, 150.
Yeah, tops.
Yeah.
In 2004, 2005.
Nice.
So they were tiny at the time, and they always made it to Portland, and I mean it was just this tiny little club drinking PBRs, checking out an underground hip hop group that I was into at the time, seeing they're obviously have grown as a group, but I mean there's some stuff going on with them that we don't want to touch. We've kind of steered clear of here. So
Yeah.
but that was a big one. And then my favorite show ever was getting to see The Boss with my dad. Getting to see Springsteen.
That's awesome.
In 2008. It was Gillette, but we were on the floor. We were down on the field, which was really cool. And Clarence was still alive. Clarence was still playing with him. So, and they played his favorite song, 10th Avenue Freeze Out. So,
That's
I mean,
awesome.
looking back on my show time, that was one of the ones that really stands out to me just because of how happy he was and I get to take him. So
That's
you know
awesome.
that's what's cool about our age geographic or demographic is like what are you, Jason? 37?
Yeah.
36? I'm 36. Twan, what are you, 35?
34. I'm young.
16,
34.
17.
Juan's the young guy, but he's seen just as much music. Is like we have like that perfect like hybrid of like seeing some like punk bands that went from like Warped Tour to mega stadium like Blink-182, or like Tony is talking about like Bruce Springsteen. It's like we're so fortunate that we were able to like be in the middle of kind of both sides of the spectrum, where I think you could today as well as like a child or a teenager or something. But it's just, it doesn't hit the same because we got to see the transformation of like a Ticketmaster ticket where the service charges were only like $20. Now they're like $60. Or like, you know what I mean? Like seeing Bruce in his heyday, even in his like, mid 50s, and seeing Blink-182 and they're coming up in a club and playing stadiums, it's like we kind of got a sweet spot, I feel like, in music history.
Definitely.
I would agree.
I have one show that all three of us are at. We'll probably wrap up on, which was 2003. And this is nowadays you wouldn't even know who headlined, but it went. Headliner was The Used, then Thrice,
Yep.
My Chemical Romance, and Story of the Year.
Oh yeah,
That is a massive show. It's hilarious.
1,500 caps.
It's like, oh my god, those bands were so big at the time, and obviously My Chem went to a completely another level. But yeah, that was the heyday for me. All of that sort of stuff. Thursday, Thrice, Finch, when those bands started coming up, Taking Back Sunday, all of that sort of stuff. It felt like not only was great new music coming out, but there are new shows coming through once a month at the very least that you'd be able to go see. And yeah, that was great.
Cool. Well, thank you, Jason, for coming on with us and geeking out with us for an hour and a half anyway, right? We got to be coming up on that. So
yeah,
much appreciated, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. It was great to talk to you guys. And it's always fun to talk about old music and reminisce and talk about new stuff as well. So it was a lot of fun. I'm going to go catch the end of the Yankee game.
Yeah, we'll probably hit you up again at some point. You never know.
Sounds great. Yeah, definitely. Let me know. Email, Instagram, either one works just fine. So yeah, it was great to hear from you guys.
Cool.
Thanks, Jason.
Take care.
Cool. That was our interview with Jason Tate formerly of AbsolutePunk.net and now Chorus.fm, which is a pivotal. Absolute Punk was pivotal for us growing up. And I mean, it's funny listening to him talk tonight. I forgot how much I had listened to him talk in the past. I listened to the podcast Encore, which was AbsolutePunk.net podcast before that. And it was always something I went back to. And it's kind of how I found music for a little while there in the early 2010s, 2013, 2014 area. So it was really cool to actually talk to the guy and be able to like pick his brain on music and how that stuff all came about. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, no, totally. He's very dialed and works hard and similar to us, no bars held. Just going to speak the truth. And, if that hurts some feelings, it is what it is because it's the truth. So therefore, that's what the platform's based on. So cool to hear his take on it. Given his personality and the way we're flowing, I feel like, man, if if we had all known each other in high school, we would probably be part of his company or he'd be part of this just because, we're doing it out of true passion and, just being very true to what we think this music means to us, which is something I admire.
Yeah, and that was kind of the thought and like the initial question we asked him, which was like, for you to have a Blink and MXPX fan site, you gotta love music and you gotta love the ancillary things that go along with it, with like the lifestyle and where they grew up and all that fun stuff. And then to take it to absolute punk, like you need to be a next level nerd, which we are. So that was cool. Yeah. One other thought though is like growing up, I always looked at absolute punk as being the ones that were spoon fed all the stories, where like the reality is no, Jason grinded, like,
yeah,
which was a whole new appreciation for, because information was not what it is today. Like, and the younger generation, I don't think gets that, but us having grown up in the era that he did, like he sought it out. Like he's emailing and texting tour managers, like that's grinding.
Or maybe even calling from a landline when he started, right? Like we're going back 2001.
Yeah.
So, not. I mean, there's cell phones then. I had just gotten mine, I believe. So yeah, I mean, craziness. It was very cool to hear how that all started, and like it's cliche to talk about, how'd you come up and that stuff, but we wanted to come at it a little differently. And like, why did you turn from being just a fan site for a band or two to wanting to build this community? And that is something that we're trying to do here. So to hear that from somebody who was able to do it to the scale that he was, it gives you gotta grind, and we grind, and it just gives you this kind of excited feeling for maybe we can do something like that, and maybe we can find some people that want to join our fun little conversation every week.
Totally. Yeah, and we're in a group text, right? I think Tony, I know you've sent this to me, which is like this thing where it's like, well, it's not really work because it's something I love. You know what I mean? It's like
totally
right. It's just like, this is work. And Jason put it perfectly in the interview where it's like, man, it's like a mountain of music I have to listen to and I have to sift through to like finally get to something that I can eventually bring onto the website to interview. Well, I mean, that's a true labor of love, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like, we're not getting paid to do this. He wasn't getting paid to do what he was doing at first. It's like, it's just coming from the heart. But at the end of the day, like, man, it is work though to get through that kind of like manual hours. Like it's not easy. And like he was saying, like it's a different time and age now. Like you're older, married, maybe sometimes kids. I know in your instance, Twan. And for him, so like that luxury of time is just not there anymore. So that kind of work ethic at that age, young, early 20s, and although it's a labor of love, it's like, well, you have other opportunities too. You have people that want to go out and have fun, go on a road trip, whatever it is, and you're like, shoot, man, I would, but I gotta like listen to this music because I have this stuff being sent to me on the daily. So
I mean, that's why he went to the model that he explained with the chorus.fm, right? Like the way he turned that into, I'm going to take a little bit, not a backseat, but just pump the brakes a tiny bit and put stuff out in the moment, as opposed to going crazy and having to try to be first on stuff and getting news and putting it out there before anybody else does. No, I want to go to that website once a day, read everything at the end of the day and be like, okay, I've gotten my fill here. I'm happy. And that's been easier for him and that's the lifestyle he wanted. It made it fun again. It sounded like listening to him talk. So that makes sense to me. That's cool.
And it makes sense. Like, I know he said this in an interview, but like in the heyday of AP, that 04, 05, 06, 07, like it was a music, if you're into that scene, it was a music Twitter feed before Twitter. Like it was, I mean, I don't know how many staff members they had actively posting. I know he said, a number of reviewers and whatnot over the years, but like it made it look like there was a machine back there just pumping out stuff. So it is interesting, to go from that to chorus.fm, where it's a little more thought out, it seems like nowadays, where it's 10 to 12, a little more digestible. But in terms of traffic, goddamn, like I believe everything he said about the servers and whatnot needing to keep up with the demand, because it was I lived on the site. I think I kept it up in my browser and just would refresh it.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think he said he had over 100 employees at one point. So that's pretty substantial in itself. But yeah, to reel it back and buy it back from SpinMedia and kind of get it back to its grassroots, that's an undertaking in itself. It's a risk. B, it's just like, wow, okay, you gave it to the corporate level. You grow up in high school and college thinking like, oh, the corporate guys, they know what they're doing. Well, clearly, and we talk about it on this podcast quite often, where unfortunately, and luckily Jason can kind of relate to this with us, is we're learning in our mid 30s that that's just not the case, and it might be kind of a changing in the ebb and flow of how corporate business works, but there's a disconnect that's very that resonates very, very vividly, and therefore the corporate level and the content creation and or real passion there's a disconnect that's so clear as day, and therefore when it's being sold off, it's either lost or dissipates over time. So that's really cool that we can actually see that direct from him or someone in his position to validate that point, because we brought it up so much on this podcast where it's like, I think this is what's going on. I don't know, but as a music fan, I feel like this is what's going on. And he kind of like answered that question for me, which is yes, it does get lost, unfortunately, once it gets to that next level, unless you're either A, buying it back, or B, you just never sell.
Yeah. Yeah, and when he talked about how things are so splintered nowadays, I mean, they totally are. We started a podcast when every person in the world started a podcast, right? Yeah. And there are little factions on each corner of the internet that we're like, we're getting on our horse and we're riding over to this corner and we're like, hey guys, check this piece out. We talked about this little bit. And then we, of an hour and a half podcast, and then we go to another place and try to do the same thing and get more and more people like buy in on that. Back then it wasn't quite the same, but he's built up enough, obviously, goodwill and cachet with people that they know what they're going to get with him, and it works. And chorus.fm is a great website. I check it out a lot. He's posted us there, which is making it, that's awesome. We were fans before that. We'll be fans after it. So really cool to hear how his evolution from, being the guy in the back room, like I said to him, be the guy in the back room, running around, putting fires out on the servers to make sure everything was working, to now he's a little more laid back, a little more comfortable, has a better relationship with it.
Yeah, that was really cool to hear the come up, because like you just don't, as a consumer of it when you're much younger. I mean, I was 18 probably when I first got into the site. You don't see all that hustle in the background and whatnot. And the other thing too is like when he sold to SpinMedia, there may be a camp that thought, you sold out, but the reality is he took a huge risk, and he's bearing that risk. So I think that takes balls too, and the fact that he bought it back is amazing. It doesn't happen. So just a cool story, really a one-of-a-kind story, and the fact that we got to interview him, 17 years after I first visited ap.net is pretty cool. This is a great interview.
Lots of fun. Yep. And Nate joked he could be the fourth member, and he really could. We could do that again next week. I would have a blast doing that again next week. Just talking like we could go through a set list with him and be like, yeah, here's what's going on this week, and it would be, smooth. It'd be comfortable. And for the first time talking to a guy that to be that comfortable with all that, that's awesome. Testament to him.
Yeah, good point. Because it wouldn't be forced. It would be like he literally is just a part of this Patio Slave crew, where it's like, all right, what do you think? You don't have to be right or wrong. Just tell me what's on your mind. That's what I want to hear. That's what everyone else wants to hear, I'm assuming, or hoping for, is just complete transparency. So, fuck the ads, fuck charting, fuck everything else. And obviously we pay attention to that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, I just want to hear what's real. So if we can talk about what's real here, then hopefully that'll transcend, because that's the interesting thing about this podcast and what Jason's done is it works bi-directionally, which is really interesting. So we're talking about music. We're talking about music that transcends to us as fans, and we can identify as soon as that is not genuine. And we talk about this all the time, or at least I do. but it's because it's so identifiable. Like, you know exactly, you know, like the moment or the second that it's not real. So with what Jason was talking about today, it's like, yeah, man, everything you're talking about, you're doing it blood, sweat, and tears. And yeah, you really do love it. But at the end of the day, it's a job and it's time. And it's like staying up till 3 a.m. to like edit, you know, it's a labor of love. So I can concur with you guys that he is, hopefully, Jason, if you're listening, you're the 4th member officially if you want.
And the fact that he's versed in the content, obviously,
Yeah,
I mean,
that helps.
it's amazing. So, yeah. So thank you guys for checking us out this week. Hit us up on the socials. We'd love to hear from you on there. Check us out. Subscribe to us on all the platforms, and appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Peace, pod heads.
Cheers, everyone.